All right, boys and girls, today we're going to talk about how to use the skill strategy for comparing and contrasting the main idea and key details of two or more texts. So, today's goal: use the skill strategy to compare and contrast the main ideas and key details of two different texts. And here is how you do it. In order to compare and contrast the main idea and key details of two texts, we use this strategy. One, read the two texts for enjoyment and just to get a general idea of the main points and key details. Your first read should just be for enjoyment. Your second read, when you reread it, highlight information in the first text to determine the main idea. So you're looking at key details. You're highlighting things that are important, and you're trying to get an idea of what the author in that first text is mainly saying about the topic. And then you're going to do the same to the second text. Finally, you're going to compare and contrast the information you highlighted or notes you took to determine whether the topic is similar or different, and use that information to support your thinking in the form of a written response. So, as you reread, you're going to ask yourself a few questions. One, what are the important points that the author is making? What key details support those points? And how are the main ideas and key details in each text similar? And then after that, is there any information in one text that was not included in the other? That might be a part of a question. So, we're going to read two texts. One of them is called Horse Talk, and the other one is called Your Horse Said What? Both of these texts are about the same topic, but they are slightly different, but in some ways similar. We're going to read both first just for enjoyment. So let's start with text A, Horse Talk by Leslie Wyatt. First heading says, they have a lot to say. Did you know that horses talk? Well, they do, and you can learn to understand horse talk if you pay really close attention to the horses you see. What's that sound? By watching the ears of a horse, you can get clues to what it's hearing. A horse can turn each ear in a different direction. For a wild horse, this trick is important for survival. The horse can hear something sneaking up behind it while also checking out a threatening noise in front. When a horse lets its ears down, it's feeling safe and relaxed. Though these actions may be natural responses and not deliberate communications, they help you know what the horse is thinking when horses speak up. Sometimes, though, horses are not just reacting to the world around them, they're sending definite messages. For example, they know they are safer when they're with other horses. If they become isolated, they neigh or whinny, calling for company. They're saying, "Where are you? I'm over here." Domesticated horses use the same sound to stay in touch with other horses. If a horse snorts, it's not usually trying to communicate anything. It's just clearing dust or grass seed out of its nose. But if it snorts while holding its head high and staring at something, it's saying, "That looks dangerous. Get ready to run." When two horses meet, they put their noses together and smell each other's breath. It's their way of saying or asking, "Are you a friend?" Horses also blow, exhaling loudly through their nostrils when they encounter a strange object or situation. They're asking, "Is this safe?" So, text A, Horse Talk, is focused on how horses communicate. Let's read the second text, Your Horse Said What, by Roseanne Bodiger. Have you ever taken a stroll down the center aisle of a barn? You breathe in the wonderful scents of hay, leather, and horses. You find yourself tempted to pat those sleek noses hanging over the stall doors, but are afraid of reaching out your hand. How do you know you won't get snapped at in the process? Horses don't speak English, but is there a way to communicate with them? Absolutely. Horses communicate through a combination of body language and noises. There is the nicker, that low grunting noise when a mare calls her foal or a hungry horse is awaiting his oats. It's a quiet sound compared to the whinny. Horses call to each other with different whinnies. The high pitched, frantic scream is made when the horse is frightened. Maybe he's in a new stable and his best buddy just left for a ride, so he's worried. Another whinny is the "Hey, how are you?" call horses use from paddock to paddock. It's just their way of saying hello. Horses can understand each other, but how do we understand what they have to say to us? You can read quite a lot from a horse's face if you only take the time to learn a few basic facts. One of the most important communication features of a horse is his ears. The horse has a very sensitive hearing. He can hear things from farther away and long before we ever do. When a horse has his ears pricked straight forward and is focused with his eyes, but the rest of his body is relaxed, then he is listening to what is in front of him. If it's you, then his attention is focused there. He is interested, but not afraid. So we just read both of the texts, and we can already say that they definitely have some things in common. They both are focused on the same topic, which is horse talk. They both say similar things. In text A, horse talk, they're talking about the sounds that horses make, and they're also talking about the different body language that a horse may use when it's trying to communicate something. So, for example, when they let their ears down, they talk about the ears and how if they let their ears down, they feel safe and relaxed. In text B, they also talk about a horse's ears, and they also talk about the combination of body language and noises that a horse use, right? So, like the nicker, the grunt, the whinny, the scream, all of those noises are ways that a horse communicates, as well as reading their ears and their face. So, let's say that you had to answer this question. Reread text A1 and A2 to determine the topic. Do both authors write about the same topic? What information is presented in one that is not presented in the other? So we have to answer two parts of this question. One, do both authors write about the same topic? And then two, is there information in one that is not presented in the other? So let's compare and contrast them. I'm going to start by highlighting important information to find the main idea of horse talk. So I'm highlighting here the word horses talk, and then I talk about how you can understand, or I highlight about this part right here. You can learn to understand horse talk if you pay really close attention. And then I highlight all the details. What are some of the different details of how a horse talks? Well, they communicate with their ears, they neigh or whinny, they sometimes snort, they put their noses together and smell each other's breath, and they blow. And then in text B, we're going to take a look here. It's also talking about how horses can communicate. But I highlight the details in this text, and I find that there are some differences. In this text, they talk about the nicker and the scream and the little grunting noise they make and how each noise is for something different. Whereas in text A, they really only talk about the neigh or the whinny and what they do when they're saying that, and then how they communicate with those little snorts. So the nicker, the whinny, and the scream are talked about in text B, but not in text A. So I'm going to remember that when I am answering my question. And then they also talk about the horse's ears, and they talk about how a horse's ears, if it's pricked straight forward, their body's relaxed, but he's listening to what's in front of him. So let's take a look at this response here. Do both authors write about the same topic? That's the first thing that I'm going to answer right here. Yes, they are writing about the same topic. To be specific, I highlighted that in green. They both are writing about how the horses communicate with each other and with humans. The texts are similar because in the text, the authors both talk about the different ways that horses communicate. Now, the purple is my evidence, my examples. For example, in the text entitled Horse Talk, the author says you can learn to understand horse talk if you pay really close attention to the horses you see. And the author talks about how a horse's ears can tell you a lot about how a horse is feeling and how the different sounds it makes can tell you what a horse is thinking. In the text entitled Your Horse Said What, I put evidence over here highlighted in blue. The author says horses don't speak English, but is there a way to communicate with them? Absolutely. So both of the authors are saying that you can communicate with horses in different ways, despite the fact that they may not talk. But the second part of the question asks what information is presented in one text that's not presented in the other. So I'm going to look at text B, and I have to look closely here. And I notice that in text B, the texts do have some differences because in horse talk, the author only talks about the whinny and snort that horses do. But text B, Your Horse Said What, the author talks about the nicker, whinny, and scream that horses do when they feel different things. So the author in text B identifies more noises that a horse would make than the author in text A. So this is a written response that answers all these questions and not only does that, but compares and contrasts the two different texts that we read.